Welcome to what would be the first episode of Evening with Freghar. This should be one of those unscripted, chill out evenings. Feel free to put some smooth jazz in the background. I'll link some in the video description. Today I would like you just to go through some very basic badge gear modification, the stuff that's linked in on GitHub. There is a document about it. The idea was to make batch gear modification easier than going through Arsenal one unit by one unit. For example, let's start with the US Army. For example, if you were to, I don't know, remove all the helmets, right? That's fun to do. You would normally have to go through edit loadout, edit loadout, edit loadout, and remove helmets from each one of those. Which is really tedious, let's be honest. You could also save the mission, or just edit the composition in a file, or edit the mission in a file, and remove the helmets that way. Also doable. That is, this batch modification is, I would say, a bit easier. So let me just copy paste the. There is a bit of code at the beginning of the document. It looks like this. This is basically the skeleton into which you copy stuff. Because what this does is that it says that iterate over or go over each selected object in the editor, and for each apply something, and then at the end save inventory for all the selected objects. So we wanted to remove helmets, right? Now it's not going to do anything right now because I don't have anything selected, but let's say we do it for the platoon. Notice it will remove the cap, it will remove any helmet, any headgear. Done. The need to go through Arsenal through each one of them. You can also like do it for everybody. So that's in a sense what the batch gear modification is that it allows you to do this kind of stuff en masse without you going through it. And all of these are valid saved Arsenal loadouts, which you can further tweak. Like the change I did is permanent as far as the mission is concerned, so you can go in and you can select a different helmet or anything, and it will work just fine. You can then remove it through the code again. But let's be honest, it's not really about removing helmets. One of the page has several examples. One of them, and the original motivation for it, was to allow switching the normal day gear for night gear. That is easily exchanging smokes for flares, adding night vision, adding suppressors, or adding weapon flashlights, even though it's not necessarily needed because everybody carries their own map flashlight, which doubles as a weapon flashlight. So let's remove all of these. Let's start with a basic example, right? Let's give them night vision. So once again, all right, I can reuse this code. I don't need to copy it over, but there we go. And to add night vision, there is this line, link item, which is the command to link anything like goggles, like night vision, like something like that. And the class name for night vision is, I think, you can look it up in game. This should be it. Doesn't do anything because we don't have anybody selected, and at this point I want to apply it only to everybody who is not crew, because crew already has night vision and I don't care about those. So all of these guys, there we go, night vision. You can You can obviously use a different class name because this night vision is, I think, the wide one, the generation 4, which we use for the pilots. But in a sense, that's it. And any further modification, like removing helmets, doesn't need to have this line, because this line is already done. It's been done, it's permanent. So I can remove the helmets. I should probably select them. And it removes the helmets while keeping the night vision, because once again the night vision was already saved permanent. So there's one thing you can do. You can add, remove night vision, add, remove helmets. You can add suppressors even like this. One of the more complex pieces of code I've seen there is swapping flares for swapping smokes for flares, which we can do. Again, this piece of code is there, and the comment around it says basically don't try to understand and just copy paste it and you're fine. And in this small view I can really explain what it does, but it goes through the backpack, through vest, through uniform, and even through the loaded grenade slots in the weapon if there is a grenade slot, and swaps out whatever's the old for the new. So this should potentially give everybody flares instead of smokes, including the loaded one, because the platoon sergeant has platoon commander has the red smoke in his underbarrel launcher by default. So let's see if he has flare loaded. Gotta love Arma loading times. See, flare around. And flares instead of smokes. I would try them out, but actually, why not? And you can fire the red one, which you already had in the barrel. There you go, red flare. And well, that's basically the gist of the idea. There are some more complex examples, like selecting a random weapon or switching uniforms, and yeah, sure, let's go through it, because that's a bit more complex and should be explained, I think. The logic it uses for swapping the uniforms and why you cannot simply remove and add uniform explained in the text. But just so you see, if I were to remove the old uniform and add the new one, I would lose any items inside it. So what I can do is I can use this one scripting command, which let's use it on the button on the officer. It's actually this get unit loadout for the selected object, and if we make this more visible, this is the entirety of this guy's loadout, right? So instead of removing the uniform and adding a new one, which would be empty, what we can do is we can get the unit loadout, which is this thing. Inside this thing, we modify one class name, and then use set unit loadout to on this entire thing to restore it back. Essentially, changing just the uniform class name without changing anything else, leaving all the weapons and items and magazines which were in the uniform. So that's what the uniform changing code does, and it can be easily applied to weapons as well. For example, if you want to change a black weapon for a tan weapon, which is exactly of the same type, like it's an M4 A1 block 2 or something like that, and you still want to keep the original magazine which was inside it, which might not have been the default one, along with the grenade slug which was in there, which might have been an explosive grenade or a smoke or a flare or whatever. So let's start with this basic template again, and let's add the uniform changing code, which was over here. So the idea is to get unit loadout, which was this big thing I showed you. In a particular place, if the unit has a uniform, then set the uniform class name to something, and this something what should we set it to? Let's find some. Let's use the UCP one, right? It should have the same loadout, just look different. Now I'll see what the class name of this is in a text editor. Where are you? There we go. So we don't care about the soldier, we care about this one. So for his uniform, we are going to set it to this class name. There we go. And now if you play as the soldier, he should have all the original items in the uniform with just the uniform changed. And you can do this with any uniform into any other uniform. The issue you run into potentially is that if you use a uniform which has lower load value, then all the items will get successfully restored, but you will be overloaded in that you will not be able to put some items back into the uniform if you put them out. Which can happen. Is not a huge deal breaker, but you should really watch out for it. It works with weapons as well. So if you were to, instead of this M4 carry handle thing, we want to use like a different one. Let's say the non-carry handle version, just the M4 original one with a grenade launcher. Let's see what the class name is. Now I don't have a nice example copy pastable already for the weapon. This is the class name, by the way, we want to change to. But what I have is that I have a piece of code in the document that allows me to randomly change weapons to one of the several randomized variants, and it's called randomizing variants of a weapon color. Is this piece. Again, the same principle. We get the entire loadout, we see if the unit has a primary weapon. If it has, then we set its class name to one of the 3 randomly selected ones. And since we don't need a random selection, we can just replace it with a static class name, which is going to be this one. That's kind of the idea behind the document, to allow you to give you a set of examples which you can modify, copy paste, extract, combine, rather than giving you all the possible combinations you might need. Try to give you an examples of wild examples, so you could possibly understand them and reuse parts of them. Now we gave him the normal M4 without the carry handle, and it should have retained his red smoke or flare. Did we change it to flare? I don't know if we reset. Anyway, his red smoke or flare should have remained inside. Normally that would be an HE round, but we changed only the class name. We didn't remove and add the weapon once again. So there's really a bit more examples in the document. What the last thing I want to show, I guess, is for the task force Noctem faction, changing the camo variants. So once again, let's begin with the basic skeleton. And the changing code is all the way at the bottom, I think. And once again, there is explanation how it works. And once again, it's more of a copy-pastable thing. But once again, the principle is basically the same. It gets the unit loadout, then it calls this recursive function, which is defined above it. And the function, all it does is it goes through every single piece of equipment the soldier has. And if the piece of equipment begins with a class name Freghar, and it contains the first string inside the class name as well, so it might be Freghar U underscore Mediterranean for uniform, it might be a vest, it might be a cap, it might be a backpack, for example. But if it finds a piece of equipment which begins with Freghar and it contains this bit in the name, then it exchanges this bit with the second bit, and then restores the loadout. It doesn't touch anything else other than anything that begins with Freghar and contains the first bit. So it doesn't touch the weapons, it doesn't touch anything we don't want it to touch. And since these units begin with the Mediterranean Freghar camo, we'll just move the crews out of the way. And we don't want snow, we want desert. There we go. We just changed the uniforms, backpacks, carryalls, everything, helmets, balaclavas, even if they had balaclavas, on to the desert variants. Might not seem very desert at this distance, but if you zoom out and if you close the GUI, desert units are much less visible than anything else, really. The missing bit here are the weapons, right? Because we do have desert and snow versions of these HKs, and we can use the logic we had before for the grain launcher to assign weapons. Where was it? It was the randomizing weapon. There we go. Now, if you were to do this and we were to set the static class name to the desert version of the HK, we would set one weapon for everybody, which is not something we want, right? So you can again get inspired by the other pieces of other examples in the document. One of them is how do we distinguish between a weapon with a grain launcher and a non-grain launcher weapon, a grain launcher weapon. And I think one of the examples was that a grain launcher weapon would have more than one magazine inside it, right? I can remove these bits. We are not interested in that. This is what we are interested in, is that if the primary weapon has primary weapon magazine it has more than one magazine in a weapon, it usually means there is at least a normal magazine and a grain launcher slot. So if we can actually see this on, if we select the officer, for example, you can see that he has the normal magazine loaded in along with the red smoke shell. So if you were to select, for example, the rifleman, he will have only the normal magazine. So you can use this as a differentiator between somebody who has a grain launcher and somebody who doesn't. Now, if you were to execute this, if you were to, we can put this inside here and also inside here. And we would use, here we would put the weapon with the grain launcher, and here we would put the non-grain launcher one. Now the problem is that it would to everybody who has a grenade launcher weapon, it would give the grenade launcher, and to everybody else, it would get the non-grenade launcher one. Meaning it would override our AR weapons, our 249s. Which is not something we really want, right? So there is another example which you can use somewhere on the page. And you will get all these ideas that you should use them or shouldn't use them just by knowing that such possibilities exist because you read the page. And the idea here is to filter out the machine guns without explicitly, we could of course filter them by a class name, say like for everybody who doesn't have this specific class name, which is the class name of the 249, add the desert version of the non-grenade launcher weapon or something like that. But the more generic way how to do this is to simply say for everybody else who doesn't have a grenade launcher and whose weapon has less than, I don't know, 40 bullets, because aside from the AR, everybody else has 30 bullets in this faction, then give them the weapon. Give them the non-grenade launcher weapon. If this thing encounters an AR, it doesn't match this because AR has a single magazine, and also then it goes here, and the weapon has more than 40 bullets, so it skips this part as well and doesn't do anything because we currently don't have a desert version of the 249. Now, you could get the desert versions of the HKs from going to Arsenal and extracting, giving the weapon and exporting and seeing the class names. I'm going to jump inside the mod into the source file to get it quicker. At least I hope. There we go. So this should be the non. I'm using the D14s, I think, instead of D10s. You could differentiate between them, but at this point I don't care as much. I'm also going to override the special snowflake AAR weapon, which is not an HK, but I value the uniformity a bit more. So this is our code, and we want to execute it on everybody. Now at this point you would save the mission, because if something breaks, you cannot undo it really. The undo functionality is not in the history, it doesn't really work well. So you would save, and if you screw up, you would reload. But I think I'm pretty confident. Yep. And everybody with the grenade launcher has the 10, the grenade launcher without is without, and we retain the ARs. And once again, this code changes just the class name inside the entire big loadout. So even in this case, we should have the correct red smoke preserved for the platoon commander. Whereas, see. So yeah, this, I guess that's about it. If I were you, I wouldn't really fear badge gear modification. It's a bit involved in that you need to read the text, and you should have some basic understanding of at least one other programming language, be that JavaScript, be that Java, be that C, be that, I don't know, whatever else. So you have the basic idea of algorithmization, but even if you don't, you're just copying and pasting bits of text, and that's really about it. And for the very simple versions like adding night vision or swapping smokes for flares and giving suppressors, that's incredibly easy stuff which you don't need to understand, you just need to copy and paste it. And once again, this loadout can be hand modified. Let's see, if we let's say I don't know of a ton version for the scope, but I know there is a ton version for the suppressor, so I can quickly go here and I can use the ton version. Click OK. There we go. So instead of like having, like before, you would have an execute code module where you would put this big function and you would prepare all your loadout changes compared to the reference one. Now you can do it like this, do it manually, do it in batch, and see the changes and hand modify the changes, tuning the details. For example, if this was not a desert, if this was snow, then having snow shirts like this, very light loadout would not make sense, in which case you would simply switch it to, from the t-shirt version you would switch it to the normal one, which would be snow, but we are on desert. So really it's not hard, you just don't fear it, I guess. Well, that's it. That's today's evening with Freghar on Modification. Hope you enjoyed, and see you some next time.